What's up and welcome, warriors. We have Diane Kaiser here and Jator Pierre on the other line. We are going to go over a topic today that is pretty controversial. It's going to trigger a lot of people. It may piss you off. It may make you sad. It may bring back memories. For me, this is actually how we even got to this topic. It was a really sore memory that I needed to work out and talk to my friend Jator about. So we're going to talk about the topic of suicide. So first of all, if you guys have never heard who I am, I'm Diane Kaiser of DianeKaiser.com. I help specifically women recharge their life, remodeling their life with hormonal revival and getting them a ton of energy in 8 weeks or less. And I've been doing this a long time. I'm a professional at it because I was a professional hormone wrecker of myself and a self-loather. And it took a journey of self-love and discovery and a ton of curiosity in order to bring me to a space where I'm in now to be able to lead women, because I was finally able to conquer some of the things that I was suffering from as it relates to depression, which is actually the biggest topic today. The reason that we came to this topic is something that I felt like I was missing from an event that I did last year called Heart to Happiness. And I interviewed 25 experts from around the world, one of Jator's friends being JP Sears. And there's something that is rampant now running around that we are ignoring, and it's the topic of suicide and why we get to this point, what it means for people, and how we can prevent it. And Jator and I were talking, and so it led us to this conversation. And it's a very, very delicate one. So we're going to be very raw today. First, I'll ask Jator, though, how are you?
It's a great question, and I like to answer questions with questions. So I wonder what part of me you're asking.
I'm going to ask them. Let's see. We'll start with the playful side of you. How are you?
So the playful side of me, feeling excited, maybe slightly apprehensive. There's some fear, curiousness, imagination, and there's also feelings of, interestingly enough, on this topic of suicide, there's also feelings of aspects of me in this moment wanting to kill and hide aspects of myself and not present it to the world.
Yeah, I feel you. And I'm not just saying that, like, Jator and I are both life coaches, and he's got many more years of experience at it than I do. And he's the reason I became a life coach. And he introduced me into this amazing community where we are all extraordinarily raw, and we dive deep into the things that even sometimes therapists aren't trained to do. And, we're not saying that this replaces what they do by any means, but it's a different angle. And so parts of me, just like Jator, are apprehensive about this. They're it's a little bit frightening to think that we're going to be judged about a topic that some people are going to be like, oh, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And, if you're feeling suicidal, you need to go seek this. And Jator and I are here to challenge that paradigm because it's not working. There's a lot of things that aren't working. And so in looking into suicide, why does it happen? Why do we have these thoughts? Is it normal to have these thoughts? This is what we're going to talk about today. So Jator has a lot of experience in helping people find their dream goals as well. So we're going to get right to it. So Jator, you and I, and this is very difficult for me to share. Parts of me feel this way anyway, and parts of me are very excited to share this with people so that they can feel not so alone in it. Mm. And I feel parts of me feeling connected to helping others with this, and it feeling like a little bit of a hijacking of, let me save you, and that makes me feel more significant. At least that's the ego part. And I'll get right to it. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, Jator and I were on the phone, and I'm not sure how it led to this, but I had mentioned to Jator, I said, in December of last year, I had pills in my hand, and they were not supplements, although you guys see me taking 10 supplements maybe at one time. They weren't supplement pills. I had these pills in my hand, and I had them in my hand after someone had asked me for, like, I don't know how many times this has been asked of me, but so many of us feel like we can't be ourselves. And I was asked, why can't you just be normal like every other girl? And
Mm.
Coming from someone who's always tried to be as unique as possible and just express myself and fight up against society, as so many of us can relate, I thought, gosh, I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win being unique. There's so many people who want to pull me into being average, and I don't like that feeling anymore. And no one's ever going to love me and accept me for who I am. So I might as well just end this right now. And I had pills in my hand. And so I'll just segue over to Jator and say, Jator, I had mentioned this to you. And what was your response?
Yeah, first, for me, I want to just acknowledge your vulnerability and courage and willingness to share that, one, on camera, and two, with me on the phone. I think that's takes a tremendous amount of courage to share. And I don't really recall what I said, but I would guess what I said was something like, well, that seems pretty normal, Diane. And you kind of took a moment of pause and took a step back and said, well, what do you mean? Something like that. And I said, well, in my experience, suicidal fantasy is something that I think is quite normal for us as human beings, because as children, we're, in our experiences of our parents and our experiences of the outside world, we're quite often discounted and we're quite often unseen. So we learn how to hide as kids, and we learn as well as how to parent our parents through being who they need us to be, being who society needs us to be, etc. So by hiding ourselves essentially in that moment, to use it as a symbol, we essentially have to kill a part of ourselves. We have to kill a part of ourselves to present ourselves as the outside world, or what we think the outside world wants us to be. So we learn this at this very basic level as children, and a lot of us go through life contorting, manipulating, and seducing ourselves so that we can fit in. And when you shared that with me, I heard that. I also heard my own voice of having suicidal fantasies at times, and my own exploration of what does that mean, and where does that come from, and why am I having fantasies? And some of the things that I've come to, at least in my own experience, is one of the reasons why I might have fantasies of suicide is actually to protect me from what my real pain is. So as an example, in that moment when you were sharing, you were having a quite vibrant pain in your life, and a lot of what I hear you saying, self-judgment, self-criticism, I don't fit in. And one way to hide from that pain is to actually create more pain in a different direction. So as our mentor often says, we're never angry about what we think we're angry about. We could take that, we're never sad about what we think we're sad about. We're never depressed about what we think we're depressed about. We're never suicidal about what we think we're suicidal about. So it's a really fascinating experience for me to question and notice, when I'm feeling a certain level of pain in my life, how do I deflect from that pain? And for me, there's many ways. It might be food. It might be over working out. It might be over meditating. It might be under eating. It might be overly facading and wearing this mask of Zen master. And another way that I can do it when it's very painful is having thoughts and fantasies of suicide. So I do want to give voice to, I am a coach, so I'm not a licensed therapist. So
and neither
with
am I.
that said, with that said, if I'm working, there's kind of a difference between fantasy and then planning and implementation. So if I'm working with a client who has even suicidal fantasy, my job is to help find the root of that, because from my perspective, the suicidal thoughts and or planning is a symptom of something deeper in the background. So what I can do is help explore that depth in conjunction with them working with a licensed therapist, so that we can work together, which then helps me stay in my scope of practice and stay safe. And then the licensed practitioner has basically the brunt of the force if anything happens. Because I'm not licensed, and that's important to say, that what I can do is play a supportive role and a role for them to help find their own roots and their own self-counsel. Something else that came up, though, in our conversation around that, which is why I really was humbled by you sharing it, is my experience of a thought of suicidal fantasy or planning or holding pills. That comes with a lot of sense of shame.
Yeah.
In my experience, many of us have a very hard time sharing aspects of self that we hold a tremendous amount of shame or fear or guilt about. So we hold that internally, and we don't express that, and we don't share that, and we don't have moments of connection where we can sit in a space with someone who's willing to acknowledge, hear, and simply be in a space with you while you're processing whatever that story is, yours being what you were sharing. We're very close friends, so for me, it felt very important to acknowledge you in that moment, which how I get my ego needs met in my coaching practice, I hope, is less through my agenda of clients getting better or attaining any result. One way that I feed my ego through my coaching practice, or even in our conversation that day, was literally to look at your story as a symbol for my own story, or where do I hold similar stories. So from my ego's perspective, then I get to get a need met by learning about myself through the facade of coaching with others. And then that helps me let go of my agenda of trying to fix anyone, which then helps me carry, I think, an energy of, look, I'm okay with whatever you want to share. And I really want to hear whatever you want to share. And through that process, we create a co-creation of a very safe, heartfelt, acknowledging environment where everything goes, everything's okay to be shared. And I think that's one of the roots of how we start to address this, is that the topics that a lot of us have a lot of shame and fear and guilt about, we don't share.
Yeah.
And if we do share them, we're publicly chastised or shamed, or even internally in our house or our family. And that creates even more shame and even more fear, which we stuff further and further and further and further down. And for me, that's not, I want to be a different kind of human being.
Yeah. I wouldn't know you if I didn't know me this way. And we wouldn't be able to present on this if it weren't for compassion. And I think that so much of what you said is, when I see a lot of clients and I see a lot of people who are struggling and they're posting it and they're sharing it in a raw state, whether it's anger or fear or extreme excitement, I get excited about people who share in a raw state. And one of my friends who I used to work with years ago, who has full-blown Lyme right now, recently commented or shared something about how pissed off that he was in working with practitioners who didn't have compassion, who didn't come from a space of empathy. And it was just prescribing protocols. And that is the paradigm that is not working anymore, where we are even shamed by a practitioner in the sense that we merely feel like they're listening, they're taking notes, but they're not feeling what we're feeling. Mm-hmm. And they're not holding space for us in such a way where we help them step out of that shame, step out with the parts of themselves that are hidden so far deep in their organs, like their digestive tract. And we wonder why we have so much disease today, heart disease and loneliness and liver toxicity and anger, and then kidneys and fear. And, what we suppress goes into digestion. And so what we repress turns into depressed. And this is something that needs to come to the surface. And so I see a lot of, like, when I asked this question today, Jator, because, you're a practitioner and you're a mentor in the Czech Institute and the Kresser Institute, two of the top health institutes in America and probably the world. And there's a reason for that. And that is because you are so real and raw. And that's how I like to express myself in the world too. And you've been a big symbol for me and JP to explore the curiosity and to dare to be different, even in the wake of the shame that comes out as a result of us stepping out. And that's what I was feeling when I had those pills in my hand and I was thinking, could I really do this to myself? I realized that it was me not trying to kill myself. It was me trying to kill that part of myself that was so unique, that felt punished for being different. And I talked to someone who pulled me out of it when I was in a dark space. I was numb. I wanted to be rescued. And I still look back and I think, wow, how sad of me. It makes me feel compassion toward myself and for anybody who is having these suicidal fantasies, that there was a part of me, ego, that truly didn't want heart to step out, to show those parts of myself, because there's punishment and there's shame and there's isolation, or at least the perception of it. If I'm different, then people aren't going to like me. And that goes way back, like you said, to the roots. So the shame, the fear, the guilt. Now I see that so many of us are living in shame and suppressing it. Oh, I don't have shame. Well, how happy are you? How wildly happy are you in your life? And so when I asked the question on Facebook today, what if I told you suicidal thoughts were normal? And I asked what questions people had. There were probably more people that responded to that with, really? Suicidal thoughts are normal? So how would you answer? How would you answer to that?
That they're normal?
Yeah. Or common?
Yeah, I would say, and I can be a little bit out there. I would say that they're as normal as thoughts of any other way that we deflect. They're as normal as thoughts of wanting to overeat. They're as normal as thoughts as maybe subconscious thoughts of watching 4.5 hours of TV. They're as normal as being on Facebook for who knows how many hours, scrolling mindlessly, which is pretty judgmental. And I'm pretty judgmental of myself when I do that as well. So I think that they're as normal as the human condition is in terms of how much we hide within ourselves. My experience of what's going on currently in the world, socioculturally, and also maybe even from kind of the spiritual or even the psychological realm, is there is a very hyper focus on positivity and a hyper focus on always being happy and always being in your bliss and always being joyful. I
Chronic happiness, always. Just think positive. Just think positive. Just think positive.
I love you.
I love you.
It's so what I find really fascinating about that, back to this idea of normalcy, is that when we create a society that thinks and deflects from, in quotes, negative emotion, we create a lot more inner turmoil internally. What do I mean by that? Well, this is a really interesting thought. If we were sitting in a crowd of 100 people and there was one person on stage, and that one person was joyous and happy and loving and dancing around in all of his or her glory, my guess is, just to play the devil's advocate, maybe there would be one person, which would probably be me or you, in the crowd that would say, I wonder what that person's hiding. I wonder what's underneath that story. Now we take that another situation, same 100 people, we put another person on stage, but that person is crying his or her eyeballs out, like just getting it out in snot and tears and heaving and throwing up and moving all of this very heavy emotion. My guess is you and I might sit in the crowd and be like, wow, that's cool. And then 98 other people would want to go up there and take care of that person.
Right.
So what does that mean for me? What it means for me is, what if we were taught from the moment we came to this planet What if we were taught by our parents, by society, by school, by our environment, that what we call negative emotion, depression, anxiety, fear, shame, guilt, anxiousness, what if we were taught that that is just as beautiful and just as important to who we are as human beings as all of the other emotions that are on the opposite spectrum? My guess would be this world would be, if we could do that, would be instantaneously changed, because we would be really expressing with each other. We would really be connecting with each other. And many more of us would stop feeling the internal pressure that we put on ourselves to put on this smile all the time, to hide our true feelings. And as you know, a good friend of mine, the redheaded sage, we've had JP and I had conversations about this, and you know, it's really interesting when you think about, I'm really into comic books, and you think about Batman and the Joker, and you think about the Joker as an archetype for current society. The Joker was so intent on presenting a smile to to the world. He had a literal scarred smile, and it was huge. And he was always laughing and always happy, presenting that as a symbol. Always, I appreciate that. And what was underneath that smile? The Joker really accentuates what was underneath that smile: fear, anger, rage, hate, shame, guilt, past stories. And interestingly enough, the Joker probably had very high suicidal thoughts as well. However, his were projected outwardly onto others, and then he would kill other people. So instead of going internal to kill himself, he would project those suicidal thoughts outwardly onto the outside world, where then he could engage in that behavior to deflect from the tremendous amount of pain that he was feeling inside about his life story. So for me, you know, the words normal, abnormal, I don't even know what those mean, to be honest. I can only speak from my experience and my point of view. And from my experience and my point of view, I know a lot of people that are willing to share that they do have suicidal fantasies throughout their life. And maybe why I have a higher vibrancy of hearing that is because I surround myself with people that are more willing to share that, rather than surrounding myself with more people that are less willing to share that. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm simply saying I want to be around human beings that are willing to express their shadow sides as well, because I find human beings that are willing to express their shadow, their feelings, and their honest opinions amazingly beautiful. And
yes,
I think that's actually abnormal, is to express yourself.
Yes. And that is what, you know, there's this meme that's been circulating around, and it's like, I have an appreciation for people who are raw. I fall in love with them because of their uniqueness and their rawness and their just vulnerability of willing to show themselves. And even their shame card, like, oh, I'm feeling so shamey right now. And it's like, well, what does that even look like? And what are you feeling shamey about? Oh, don't feel shamey. But yeah. That's one of my favorite non-things to say to people is like, you know, I'm so sad. Well, don't feel sad. Well, can I get this out? Can I sneeze? It's like a sneezing of an emotion. I really want to get it out. Can you hear me out? Can you be with me? No, because I'm very uncomfortable with the feeling of sadness. So I don't want you to feel it because I don't want to feel it because I'm So it's like, that is what I saw in you when I first met you. And then when I heard you articulate it, it was so amazing. And I want you guys all to try this on for size. And then I'll ask a question about suicide, going back to the topic. Is Jator, I'm able to love you more because you allow me, through your rawness and your reality and your vulnerability to sharing all the different colors, the shadow, the light, the dark, the happy, the sad, the love. I can feel and love parts of myself through your vulnerability and rawness, because you are the reflection of me. And the way I feel about you is my reflection back about myself. And so that projection of, oh, I hate you, is we're hating the parts of ourselves because we see that in another person that we have suppressed. And so the way that I was taught by you, what I really love is when I say I love you, I'm really saying I love who I am through you. I love my experience of me because of how you show up. And that's beautiful. Like, who could I have ever said, you know, I had suicidal thoughts. Like, I had fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I could ever put myself through the act of it. You know, that's the thing. It's the thought of it, then there's the planning of it, then there's the actual act. And I didn't even get to planning state. I was like, well, what does this feel like to have pills in my hand? And does this work? And I don't know, but I really feel shitty about myself right now. And so a ton of things flashed through my mind, and I'm thinking, all of this is because I felt unloved by men. And wow, what if I offed myself? And we couldn't even have this conversation because I wasn't feeling secure about myself through the experience of men. And when people say suicide is very selfish, it's a very selfish thing, that flashed through my head. And I thought, in this moment, I can't think of anybody else but my pain. And so what would you say to the comment or the statement, suicide is a selfish thing?
I love it. You put me on the spot. It's awesome.
Spot. See, spot
Spotlight.
run. See, spot run.
God. Yeah, I appreciate that. What I really appreciate is a couple things. I think, in my experience, that selfishness, for me, is really a misunderstood word. I think selfishness is actually a beautiful word, and it's also a virtue. I think it's very, very important for us to be selfish. And maybe said in another way, maybe one must be selfish to find self, to become selfless.
Yes.
And my experience is that maybe because of religious programming, a lot of us deem it necessary to be at the selfless stage. And we see that as the stage to be at, and that means that we're a morally good human being, and we're going to be showered with accolades throughout life because of how selfless we are. But a simple question comes up for me, which is, if we are moving from a selfless space, but that's not truly authentically selfless, my question is, does that then build a tremendous amount of resentment? Because if you're giving away what you don't give to yourself, my guess and my experience, personal experience, is that it builds resentment. So is suicide a selfish move from the perspective, is the person then taking self into his or her own hands and making that decision because of his or her own experience of pain, shame, guilt, betrayal, abandonment, fear, etc.? Selfish, yes. Maybe necessary too, and maybe at times not necessary. And for me, I think this is where maybe part of the split in the road happens. So we have these suicidal fantasies, and if we don't find somewhere to express those, if we don't find someone who can help us process and integrate the past and what the symptom of our suicidal thoughts represent to us, then my guess is those will continue to build. And they will build, for some people, to a point where it moves beyond fantasy and moves into reality and actual action. However, I think again, back to that point in the road where change can occur, is It's not so much about, for me, finding someone that's going to parent you. And that's a lot of what I'm not on social media very much, but when I am, it's a lot of what I see. Like, if you're going to commit suicide, call me, I'll take care of you. For me, that's not what people need. Maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
Some level of functional parenting. What I think most people need, in my experience of this, is to be heard.
Yes.
To be acknowledged, to be seen, and to have someone hold space for all of their feelings and allow them to express what's going on inside of themselves. And that feels, at least in my experience, very, very powerful. If we continue to do the parenting thing, we're just eventually creating more of the same. We're creating more of this dependency on the outside world to take care of us, to validate us, to inspire us, and to save us. And I think that there has a time and place for that, and there's a time and place to move past that, which is, how do we learn to validate, acknowledge, inspire, hear ourselves? One of the first steps is to find someone who can model that behavior. So you and I, with each other, get to model that behavior when we're going through something. We can be there for each other in the sense of, I'm here as your homie. I'm here to hear you. I'm not here to give you advice. And I'm here to be present with you. That is
here.
That's extremely powerful, and I think extremely underrated.
Yeah, it's the first thing that people want to do is, like you said, save and rescue. And that's that ego part of the other person saying, no, I got to save them. It's my responsibility. And we create our own codependence for them because of our own insecurities. And I think that it is very difficult to teach other self to parent by just holding space, because we're frantic and our own emotions that are unresolved come up. And so, like you said, it's a very important, you guys, we're running in a fast-paced life today. And if you look at your top 5 people in your life, are they happy? Are they depressed? Would they be the kind of person that if you had a moment like this, that you could call and they would just hold space for you and just be a sounding board as you regurgitate and you literally vomited this crap out of you? I mean, a lot of people that we work with, when they're cleansing, emotionally cleansing, there's diarrhea, there's constipation, there's vomiting, their hair's falling out. They're literally falling apart so they could put themselves back together with the new soil, like Jator is talking about. If we're looking to have a strong foundation, we've got to start with the roots. And like I said, this is really cute visually made, is parts of the pathogens, the nasty suckers that live in the soil that create this stuff in the mind. And we're going to get to that physically next, is OPP, other people pleasing. Yeah, you know me. I guess we all have a little bit of it. Spreading can I say that like without getting in trouble? OPP. And spreading ourselves too thin, people pleasing, like I said already, PTFDing, pointing the finger, it's everybody else, it's projecting, it's pushing away, it's deflecting, it's thinking that we need to get our needs met by performing a certain way and compensating for parts of self that made stories up about ourselves when we were a child that thought, I never want to feel incomplete again, so I'm just going to be an overachiever and do everything perfectly and go all out and just go hard in the paint with everything. And I can't ever think of time for self because I'm literally performing all day long. This used to be me. I'm a recovering workaholic. Nothing was ever enough because I was still not enough in my heart. And so I got to work. I can't, there's no time for joy because I have to work, because I have to perform, because I have to get my ego needs met that still tells me I'm not enough. And that's what puts you over the edge. When one next person tells you that you're not enough and shines a light right on your own perception of I'm not enough, they're just validating what I already know. So perhaps I'm even attracting those people into my life to confirm that ego identifying of self, that I'm not enough. See, look, I'm not enough. There's the evidence. Look, I shouldn't even be here. I'm just not enough. So what we were just talking about with the soil stuff, if we can move into this physically, I love this topic. My colon hydrotherapist, her comment to this was, let me scroll up here. I believe their response to a signal the colon sends to the brain where there is no fuel absorption. It's a message warning to the body that they are moving toward death. Death sits in the bowel, right? Death starts in the bowel, not getting enough fuel. Suicidal thoughts are a direct link to the colon. Why do you think medication commercials announce that suicide thoughts may happen after taking the medication? It's because the meds can cause interference with digestion and fuel absorption. So literally, if you watch these, SSRIs or anything that alters the mood or the colon, suicide's like the first warning as a symptom, as a side effect. And I hear a lot of women saying, as it pertains to sex, they're like, it's dead down there. Well, oh, so your vagina has already committed suicide? Like, how did that die? And what can we do to bring it to life? So you're talking a lot about that. So what of suicidal fantasies or thoughts, Jator, as it relates to the physiological, chemical, physical body?
That's a big one.
Run.
Yeah. A couple of things that came up that I'd like to share before diving into that is around other suicidal thoughts. I think important for people to ask and consider their own thoughts, which are, if you're having suicidal fantasies or planning, one question I would ask is, who are you trying to punish?
Yes.
Who are you trying to punish and to get attention and acknowledgement from?
I'll show them.
I'll show them, or the martyr. They'll notice me when I'm gone.
Yeah.
They'll feel sorry when I'm gone. It might be the ultimate call for attention. So I think that's really important.
Thank you.
And then from a physiological perspective, I think that colon thought's pretty interesting. Some other things that come up for me, which I'm sure your audience is, I'm probably sure that your audience is well versed in, is just an inflammation and inflammatory markers in the body. So the inflammatory markers in the body leading to global inflammation, leading to gut dysbiosis, colon dysbiosis, intolerances, and then leading to inflammation in the brain, which has been shown to cause anxiety, depression, etc. And those are some of the roots of suicidal tendencies and suicidal thoughts. And in conjunction with that, suicide, I think, is also thinking about what part of the body are you trying to kill as well. So my experience is that our physical bodies are very easy platforms for our mental and emotional perspectives to be plastered onto and to beat us, excuse my English, to SHIT.
That's okay. You can say shit.
Okay.
Because we are talking about the colon, right?
Yes. So I love that the colon definitely could play a role for sure. My experience of human beings, inclusive of from a psychological perspective, these are all like threads of very, very, very complex spider webs. And we each have these very, very complex spider webs. So for some people, let's say death and suicidal thoughts manifest in the colon. For other people, it might manifest in their heart. For other people, it might manifest in their liver. For other people, it might manifest as a blown disc in their back. For other thyroid, great. For other people, it might manifest as continually being in accidents. The higher the trauma. So when you look at trauma, whether it's physiological trauma, emotional trauma, my perspective is a lot of that comes into our life, inclusive of suicidal thoughts, to help wake us up. So sometimes, in my perspective, it takes trauma to get us out of trauma. So I've had many injuries in my life, and all of them have come with moments of self-reflection, time off, and time to What is my body sharing with me? What is my higher self or source or God or whatever you want to call it sharing with you? Or your brain. I don't care how you want to frame it. It's a moment for you, maybe, to explore yourself and explore what's going on underneath the surface. And yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful moments to, it doesn't always feel beautiful. And not all of me agrees that it's always beautiful. As an example, I dislocated my shoulder, I think 3 weeks ago now, which frustrates the hell out of me. I'm angry about. I have some rage about. I really wish it didn't happen for parts of me. And for other parts of me, I'm getting to explore, why do I push myself so hard? I'm getting to explore, what was my body bringing to my attention, my right shoulder, my relationship with men and masculine energy, maybe something to do with my throat and my heart and what's being unacknowledged there. So the way that I see this is, these are all ways that our subconscious mind expresses to us, inclusive of these suicidal fantasies. So
yeah,
what are they expressing to you?
Yeah.
What part of you is calling out for your attention to be heard and needs to call out so loud internally that it's threatening death?
You know, it reminds me of, we're in a relationship or we're in a job, we're at an event, and we're like, screw this. This does not feel good. I'm leaving. I'm going to end this thing right now. Or like right now, people are watching. Like, I'm going to end this call right now. This just pisses me off. It's like, well, that's what we're talking about here but it's just life. We're wanting to put an end to something. And so it's our body just saying, put an end to something. But the thing doesn't have to be our entire life. The thing, like you said, can be a trapped trauma or a hidden hurt. That is, if we were to dare explore, which so many people, and you probably hear this all the time too, Jator, in your work, is like, I heard it 4 times today with clients, is I don't know if I want to go back there because that road hurt me when I went through it. And if I walk back again, it's going to hurt me again. And I don't want to go back there. So I'm just going to, didn't happen. Everything's fine. Chronically happy, think positive thoughts. And it's like, that's the Joker syndrome. And I can say from experience that walking through all of my trapped traumas and exploring, like, what age was I, or what age are we when we're speaking up like these thoughts about self? What age was I, or as close as possible, what event happened where we formulated that story and then created a compensation to cover it up so we didn't have to feel that shame or guilt or sorrow or fear ever again. And someone commented too when I asked about this, is that her husband lost and of course there's so many people that were so excited that we're doing this, Jator, so excited. It's a hot topic right now. I didn't even know it. And she said, what?
I didn't either.
So I think it's great. No shame around shame. It's like, that's the stigma, is there's shame on shame. And she said her husband's, just like my godfather, when her husband's best friend passed away, and he felt this guilt, like he could have done something different, but he felt guilty about feeling depressed and suicidal because he had this amazing life and he had great kids and a great home and a great wife and a great job and everything was great, but he was feeling sad and he felt shame about that sadness and had suicidal, probably just fantasies. And so there's probably a lot of it, and you're a man, so I want you to speak to men about this, because women are more expressive about our emotions. I can say, just before you comment, you were talking about your right shoulder. My entire left side is where all my injuries exist. And I've had a problem with my feminine side for a long time. Is I'm like, I'm just going to be out there. I'm going to show the world that I can, just like you're a hockey player, I'm a soccer player, and I can do this, and I got this, and I don't need anybody, and I can't be codependent on you. And I don't even know what that means, but I could do it on my own. And a lot of trapped trauma, hidden anger. I don't have any anger. And then I went to that workshop with John that weekend with you, and I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm an A+ on anger. I got no anger. And a week later, I was like, I'm pissed. What? I'm so pissed. I'm like, what am I pissed about? What am I pissed about? It's because my dad won't quit smoking. switch of sweets. And he's like one puff closer to death. And it pisses me off and I can't control him. Oh, okay. Why am I a health practititioner? Because I can control other people's health. Well, that felt good to release.
That was pretty good. I like that. I like that.
It feels better out than in, you know? So I'm a female. It's more acceptable for us to talk about this. So can you speak to the men, please, Jator, who have these emotions? And we'll end on that note because I feel like that's a big part of where we can come together. Men who are vulnerable are beautiful and sexy, and speak to that, please. How can they?
I love that. Oh man, that's, yeah, you know, that feels, I think that my experience of being a man, is that one of the ways I've found to be able to do that, which is still a work in progress, because there are feelings that are hard for me to share still. Anger being one, rage being another. At least in functional ways, I can express those pretty well on the ice, but in functional ways, it's something I'm still working on. And I notice that I have a lot of fear around my anger because my anger has been out of control before. So I know what that feels like. And I think that for men and for women, because quite honestly, I meet a lot of women who actually aren't that good at expressing their emotions. So I think as human beings, one thing that we can all do, a very easy step, a very simple step, maybe not easy,
right,
is to literally start to pay attention to how you speak to yourself on a daily basis. Do you hear the amount of criticism? Do you hear the amount of blame? Do you hear the amount of anger towards self? Do you hear the amount of I'm not good enough? As an example, before getting on and doing this with you, I was having some literal suicidal thoughts, and I was having a little laugh with myself because I think I was laughing because it's quite painful. But some of my thoughts were, wow, it might be easier to be dead than do this podcast or do this webinar. And why is that? Well, my experience of myself is that I have a huge inner critic. And I have aspects of myself that never feel good enough, never feel like I'm smart enough, never feel like I perform enough. The case of not enoughs. So as I explore that, I start to look at where are some of the roots, and it doesn't have to be the deep, dark roots. And I think that's where people get it twisted as well, is that start where you feel comfortable. So I'm 40 years old. Let's say I felt comfortable feeling into a root at 35 years old. When I was 35 years old, what was going on in my life where I didn't feel like I was enough? And what does that part of me need to hear from current Jator, future Jator, 40-year-old Jator, that can speak to him and listen to him and acknowledge him in a different way than I did it when I was 35? Because at 35, at least for what I recall in this moment, I was still speaking to myself the way that I experienced my parents to speak to me.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that that's how my parents spoke to me.
Right.
I'm really trying to be clear that that's how I experienced my parents to speak to me. That doesn't make it true. It just means that that was my experience. And I took those experiences on, and that's how I learned my own self-talk and my own ways to look at myself internally. So as men, my experience being a man might be a little different than most men, because I was raised in a house where my dad was the one who came to my crib and rocked me to sleep. My dad was the one that played a guitar near my crib. My dad was the one that stayed home with me. My dad was the one that encouraged me to share my feelings. So I feel a little because I didn't have, my only experience of that shaming of those feelings was in my outside world, at school, in hockey, around my friends, etc. So it takes a tremendous amount of courage to share your feelings. So to some of the men out there that feel, like what's that song? I practice looking hard. There's an old song that you're hard all the time. That's cool as a protective shell. Just know that you're protecting something, because your hardness is actually a sign of how afraid and insecure you are. And the way that most adults, in my experience, share their fear is through anger. So the more angry you are, the more hard you are. The flip paradox of that is actually the more insecure, more fearful you are. Think about guys in the MMA. Now, all those guys would beat me to kingdom come. I'm not saying that, guys. But what I am saying is that they all have a tremendous amount of fear, shame, and guilt. And
Yes.
That's why they have to go into a ring and beat other people up, probably beating up their dad. So it's the amount, it takes a tremendous, it's pretty interesting. For me, it takes a tremendous amount of unconscious courage to be hard all the time. If you can take that, the amount of focus that you have on hiding things,
yes,
and being a badass, if you can take that amount that you focus on that on a daily basis and just take a squeak of that toward this other place, and find someone in your life that feels like a safe place to you to express some feeling, then start doing that. As an example, I have a client who is going through a lot of trying to connect to his anger, and actually, in my experience, has a lot of denial that he has anger. So what his homework or home play was, I like to call it home play, not work.
Mm-hmm.
What his home play was, he's a tennis player. So his home play was to go to the tennis court with his internal 5-year-old. His internal 5-year-old's there to make it playful. His 35-year-old is there to hit balls at a moment in his life when he was 11, where he experienced a pretty traumatic event with his parents that he has a lot of anger about. So his first step in expression actually isn't through his language or through his word. His first step of expressing his feelings is intentionally going and doing a movement or a practice with his body, because he feels safe moving his body.
Yeah.
It's somewhere where he feels comfortable and he feels acceptable. So if he can learn to do that with intention of sharing feeling through my movement, that will help to build the muscle of learning how to speak it. And that might be 6 months down the road, a year down the road. And we might take a year of him playing tennis, learning how to express through movement and intention to, again, build the muscle to give voice to it.
I love how you pointed to the muscles there. And that's especially where I was pointing earlier. That's the seat of our thyroid. That's the seat of where we speak our truth. And so many people have trapped thoughts that they hold back. And, thyroid disease is the fastest growing disease among women. And, and they own it. My Hashimoto's, my hypothyroidism, my thyroid cancer, my cancer was removed, and we're removing these cancers, but they're the manifestation of these trapped traumas that we're not addressing. And like you were just talking about with men, the hardening, think about the hardening of the spirit. What about the hardening of the arteries? And then we've got heart attacks, and then the hardening of the organs. And we've got gallbladder removals and gallstones and kidney stones, the hardening of fear in the kidneys and dialysis, the hardening of the colon in colon cancer. It's like, what if it wasn't even the toxins in food that was creating our mood, but the thoughts that we were thinking when we're eating these foods that made them toxic, that made us self-loathe so much that we didn't even want to exist on this planet anymore. And that's probably the best thing to end on there, is that what is your relationship to self? What is your relationship to food? What is your relationship to yourself about the world? And what is your relationship to the parts of yourself, like Jator mentioned, when you were a little kid, when you were a little boy, when you're a little girl, and you're a teenager, and all these awkward years in high school. And I know that's my most troubling, my troubling teen, that is the one that's like, oh, you should definitely wear that so you get attention from the boys. And then I get the attention from the boys and they want me to be normal. And then I'm like, well, yeah, and then back to that again. So what is it that drives you? What is that emotion that drives you to feel not enough, that you really are in this space of having these thoughts about suicide, whether they just be seduction to get attention? Where are you not getting your needs met? Where are you not being real and honest? And I'll say this thing, the things that have attracted me to men in the last 5 years that I've been doing this have been when a man tells me a deep, dark secret about himself that he is afraid to be judged by. And I feel so instantly connected. Instantly. I'm like, that was beautiful. So when we're thinking about divorce and separations and confusion and breakups and not feeling enough because someone doesn't show up, we have to ask the question of, what if love did show up to our doorstep? Would you acknowledge the courage if someone brought something vulnerable to you, like Jator shared earlier? What would you do with it? Would you be like, no, I don't want to hear that stuff? And that means that probably parts of yourself are afraid of yourself because you're afraid of what they're saying. So this video, this webinar, this interview is to draw attention to the topic that so many people are afraid to put their finger on because they fear not knowing what to do with it within themselves, if it's about themselves or if it's about a friend. And so hopefully we can end with this, and I'll ask you like the 3 hot takeaways. What you were just talking about as it came up with a quote that rhymes, which makes it really cool. It takes more energy to not feel than it takes to be real. So when we're like running around super tired and 90% of America is hooked on Starbucks and caffeine, we wonder why. It's the resistance of self that wants to really just come out and be you. So what would you say, Jator, in closing, would be, in summary, 3 key takeaways for if someone has suicidal thoughts, or maybe a friend has suicidal thoughts, and how we can help pull them out of that, support them?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes up, maybe number one thing, around any thought that comes up for any of us that feels shaming or fearful, or we don't want to share it with anyone. The first thing that I do with those thoughts is I acknowledge them. And I literally just got a tattoo today on my hands.
I was like, what is this? Did you draw this on for our video? This is special.
No, so it's for me. So it's backwards. So I'll try to put it up. But it says, be kind.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think that's my biggest takeaway in doing a lot of self-work, is that if I can remember to be kind to myself. So when I have suicidal thoughts or anxious or depression, and what kindness means for me in this moment is, can I acknowledge it, hear it, and tell that part of me that it's okay. It's okay to feel that way, and I'm here for you, and I'm here to hear you. I'm not here to tell you anything. I'm not here to shoo you away. I'm here to be kind. So I got it in really big writing on my hand.
I don't know if I can't read that font.
Well, you'll see it in person soon.
Yeah.
But that's my thing right now, is really learning to be kind to myself, because my experience is that we celebrate ourselves through criticism much more than we celebrate ourselves through being kind, empathetic, and compassionate.
God, I know.
So that would be number one.
BK, be kind, not bankrupt, not emotionally bankrupt. Be kind. Be kind.
And it kind of becomes this little acronym for me. So be kind also means be kind, K-I-N for inner, and D, child. So be kind to my inner child.
Love that.
So be kind to your inner child, number one. I think number 2 would be to learn and invite yourself to start expressing your feelings and emotions somehow, some way. Some things that I do with clients who have a hard time expressing is journal your emotions. You don't need to share it with anybody. Journal all of how you're feeling. Voice record your emotions. Talk into a voice recorder.
I do that.
I think what a lot of people forget is that sharing emotion and also speaking is just like anything else that we do. It takes practice. We go to the gym to, whether it's to build our body or perform better, that takes time and effort. So if you put a ton of pressure on yourself and then shame yourself because you don't express well, or you don't have a lot of emotional expression, then you're going to hide even more from it.
Yes.
So if you can recognize that it's a muscle like any other, it takes practice, it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes consistency.
Yes.
Then that's beautiful. And maybe find, I think Byron Katie has a pretty good list. There's other lists out there, but find a list of emotions, an emotion list, so you can start to build your emotional vocabulary. So when you're feeling something and you don't know how to express it, whether it's to yourself in your journal or on your recorder, you can pull out your emotions list and look through them and say, oh, actually, I feel like that. That's how I feel. Beautiful. And then by doing that, then you're starting to attach feeling to words, so then you can start to share or have a better clarity on what's actually going on internal to you.
From emotionless to emotion list.
Yes.
Well done.
And then I think number 3, which is, I think, really, really important as well, that my experience, many of us are lacking, is finding a community that resonates with who you want to become. So if I have my boys from the time I was 7 years old, and I still hang out with them, and I love all of those guys. None of them are really into doing this type of work, which is cool. No judgment. I get it. Is there judgment? Maybe there's judgment.
Yeah, there's always.
But I love them anyway.
When people go, oh, not to judge, but yeah, you were always judging.
I love them anyway, and I really accept them because they remind me of parts of me that are still there. So I really appreciate them. And I also have a community of new friends that are, I think I'm going to say, hand chosen. So my old school homies, they're my brothers. And my new school friends are ones that I'm choosing that have something in them that I really respect, and also have the ability to share a spectrum of emotion, because that's important to me. Now, I'm not saying that's important to everybody, but what I am saying is find groups and community where you feel comfortable to be more of who you really are. And that might be a huge key, is finding communities where you're not just hanging out because they like you for these little chunks of you, but you're hanging out in these communities that have a more vibrant expression of acceptance of all these aspects of you. And even if that's 2 more aspects, that's cool. We all start somewhere.
Right.
And that's what, our friendship represents to me. That's what Journeys represents to me. A lot of my friends from Journeys. My best friend, JP, the most beautiful thing about our friendship is that, for me at least, he knows every deep, dark, dirty secret from the moment of my conception to 40 years old. And he knows my beautiful parts. He knows my ugly parts. He knows my crazy parts. He knows my insane parts. And I know all of that about him. And neither of us ever bat an eye. It's always like, cool. what do you want to do now? And that is my model of how I want to move in relationship, and how I want to move in friendship, and how I want to move in partnership.
Imagine if businesses all ran this way. You know, I feel like that's the number one space where people feel like they can't branch out to be themselves because they'll literally get fired. And it's why 86% of people are not happy with their business and their careers right now, is because where is there to be authentic without the fear of losing your income? So to summarize, be kind, express emotions, and get into a community where you feel safe. Or maybe parts of you feel unsafe when you're sharing it, but it's welcomed is probably the best way. Just one step for you to step in, a space for you to step into that's just a nugget of growth, even in the right direction. It doesn't have to be perfect, everyone. It does not have to be the perfect group that you pick the very first time. And your handwriting, your cursive, the way that you create, like Jator said, journaling, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just start somewhere and be consistent, because if you start shaming the shame journals, then you get nowhere. So just know it's all a journey and it never ends, and there is no destination. But what we're trying to prevent is that you prematurely ending it because you're not happy with the parts of yourself that you want to terminate, which is okay, because we're always doing that. We're always cutting parts out that we don't like or remodeling it. And that's what real suicide is about, is just wanting to rejuvenate parts of self that are begging you to listen, that you haven't been for a long time, and hiding from, and welcoming the conversation. And if you need a bridge to help you communicate, you know, little boy self to current self, or little girl self to adult self, Jator is an amazing space for that. So Jator, can you share with them how they can find you?
Yes. So my website is wehlc.com. And my YouTube channel, which is Explore with Jator on YouTube. So that's where I'm at.
Go explore with Jator, you guys. Explore with someone that allows you to explore parts of yourself that have been crucified or mummified for a long time. They want to come out and play. They want a hug. They want something. They want attention. And that's, if we can have compassion, that's all of us. That's what we do, is when we're acting out, it's little inner children parts of us that just want attention. Then there isn't as much shame or judgment or projection of fear onto other people, because we can just see ourselves in other people. And hopefully this helps a lot of you that have thought about it or have friends who have. By all means, if you're having any of these major thoughts, we don't recommend to run straight to us. You know, there's therapists for that are licensed, but it does help, like Jator said, in combination. So save your life through looking into the shame parts of yourself that are looking to be held. And we thank you guys for being here for yourself today and giving us a purpose.
Can I can I make one video recommendation?
Yes.
I think is like maybe number 4, which I think will be aligned with the physiology aspects of what you're sharing.
Oh, yes. I think I know what you're going to say.
There's a video online that's called Go the Fuck to Sleep. Everyone should watch that video. That in and of itself, getting a good night's sleep, trust me on this, from research perspective, from an inflammatory perspective, from a mind perspective, from a projection perspective, from a stress perspective, anxiety and depression perspective, go the fuck to sleep. And I was going to wear my blue blockers while we're on here, but I thought people might want to actually see my eyes.
Thank you. I have mine behind me. So
as soon as we're off, I'm throwing mine on.
I know. The world is so bright and so noisy, so we got to just chill out. That's key point, guys. We got to rest. And if we're not, then that's where our body is feeling distressed. So if you're feeling distressed, get some rest. We're talking like 8 hours, and ideally 10 to 6-ish around there, like nature intends. So very good point. Watch that video of Jator's, continue the journey with him on his YouTube channel, or with me on DianeKaiser.com. Diane Kaiser, I'm the only one in the world named that. Jator Pierre is the only one in the world, I think, that's named that. So it's pretty easy to find us, and I'll put all the information below. Jator, thank you for your rawness, your vulnerability, and your authentic self, and bringing the courage and the wisdom for all of us to experience so that this suicide stuff and projection in the form of shootings all around the world subsides as quickly as we were able to cover it in one video.
Thank you for having me. I'm super honored and humbled. I love you.
I love you too.